Welcome, welcome, welcome to the ultimate beginner's guide to Gwent, episode 2. On the previous episode, we spoke about main menu UI, and we also talked about in-game resources. And if you guys missed that episode, you can find the link directly above me at the top of the page. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing basic gameplay mechanics. So we're going to be talking about in-game UI. We're going to be talking about the coin flip, the Mulligan Phase, reacting to your opponent, when to pass, what to do in round 2, and what to do in round 3. So, without further ado, let's do this. Alright, let's start by taking a quick look at the UI. To our left is our leader ability, which is going to be the most important and powerful tool at your disposal. And usually our entire deck is built around our leader ability. Right here, this stack of cards that is currently empty is our graveyard. So any card that is destroyed on our side of the board goes to the graveyard, and also at the end of a round, all the cards on our side of the board go into our graveyard. And you can right-click on it to see the cards in there. There's nothing in there right now, so we can't see anything. These cards right here are the cards in our current hand. This stack of cards right here is our deck. So these are the cards that remain in our deck that we haven't drawn yet. And as you can see, you right-click on that, and it shows you everything that is still in our deck. This is the pass/end turn button. These numbers right here, this is our point total for our side of the board, and this is the enemy's point total for their side of the board. Also a little useful feature, if you click on this crown, it shows you the row totals, which can be useful under certain circumstances. So this right here shows your melee row total, which is all the points that have accumulated on your melee row, and this shows your ranged row total. This number down here where it says 10/10, that's the number of cards still in our hand and the number of cards still in the enemy's hand right here. One of the most important things, of course, is the chat wheel. This is where you can talk smack to your opponent. So if you want to say something, nasty like "you're going down" in Elven, that's where you want to do it. He comes back with a rebuttal. This right here, actually, this is called a stratagem, and the player that goes first in round 1 always gets a stratagem. The default stratagem is tactical advantage, which we see here because we're just playing the basic starter deck. So this is basically to offset the disadvantage that you get by going first. So this tactical advantage says boost an allied unit by 5. One of the most important things early on is utilizing tooltips. So if you hover over a card, you'll see this little tooltip window pop up that gives you information about the card. And as you can see, some words are highlighted. So those are keywords. So if we hover over Mahakaman Marauder, for example, it says deploy, gain vitality for 2 turns. Well, maybe we don't know what vitality means. Maybe we don't know what deploy means. So all you do is right-click on the card, and it gives you a more in-depth description, and it explains the keywords here on the right. So anything that's highlighted, it will explain here. And this is super useful. You want to be doing this constantly early on just so you understand what everything means. So deploy, trigger this ability when played. Vitality, status that boosts this unit by 1 on the end of its turn. So that's great. And you can also do that on the enemy's cards, which you want to be doing if they play a card and you don't know exactly what it did. Just right-click on it, and it'll give you everything in detail. And you want to know what that card did, and you want to know what it's going to do in the future. So I think that's pretty much it for the user interface. So let's move on. Alright, so one of the first things that happens in every match is the coin flip. And the coin flip just simply determines who goes first and who goes second. And as you can see in this case, we got blue coin, which means we go first. And when you hear people refer to blue coin and red coin, blue coin means you go first, red coin means you go second. Now there are advantages and disadvantages to going first and second. Usually it's seen as a disadvantage to go first, and that is for a couple reasons. One is you have an empty board, so there's no cards to interact with. So, for example, if you're playing a faction like Nilfgaard, and your hand has a ton of cards, or most of the cards in your hand want to interact with other cards, well, you have no options, and you're basically going to have to play a card that's not going to get full value. Also, going first, you run the risk of losing the round on even, which just means you lose the round with the same amount of cards as your opponent. And the problem with that is they then have a very good chance of being a card up on you in round 3. So they can dry pass in round 2, and you'll go down a card, or they can push you in round 2. They can play into round 2 with no risk to them of going down a card. So usually you're pretty happy if you get red coin, and you might be not quite as happy if you get blue coin. There are a couple things that the game does to alleviate the disadvantages of going first. One being the stratagem, which we already saw, which is just a card that you get on your side of the board if you go first that has a bonus. The default stratagem is tactical advantage. Also, you get one more mulligan, and we'll talk about mulligans in just a second, but the player that gets blue coin gets 3 mulligans, and the player that gets red coin only gets 2 mulligans. Cool, so let's move on. Alright guys, let's talk mulligans. Let's talk about the Mulligan Phase. What is it? The Mulligan Phase is where we have the opportunity to redraw cards. So at the beginning of every match, we draw 10 cards, and then we have the ability to redraw cards. If you go first, you have blue coin, you get 3 redraws. In this case, we got red coin, so we have 2 redraws. And what a redraw means is you simply click on the card that you want to remove from your hand. It sends it back into your deck, and then you pull a card out of your deck and it goes into your hand. So the question is, how do we know which cards to redraw? And that depends on a number of things. We're going to spend a little bit of time on mulligans because it's actually pretty important. In general, on a basic level, you want to build a hand that has a mixture of bronze cards and a mixture of gold cards. And you also want to make sure that your hand has some type of synergy. Meaning, let's see, what synergies would we have here? Okay, so this card, a Mahakaman Defender, every allied turn on turn end boosts self by 1 if this unit is boosted. So for this card to gain value in our hand, additional value, we would need something to boost this card, which we actually currently... well, actually, yes, we can. We can boost it with the officer. So there is a slight synergy here. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for cards that that work well together and that we get a lot of value out of. Also, depending on how bad we want to win round 1, and the way you determine how bad you want to win round 1 is you need to ask yourself, is my deck better or worse than their deck in a long round 3 or in a short round 3? Because if your deck is really good in a long round 3 and their deck is really good in a short round 3, well, then it's going to be more important for you to secure that win in round 1 so that you can guarantee a long round 3 for yourself. And if that's the case, you really want to build a hand, like we said, that has a lot of synergy, but also has a number of gold cards that you are willing to spend. You always want gold cards in your hand, but if you really want to win the round, you need to be able to play pretty deep into the round, which means play a number of cards. So you want bronze cards that synergize, and you want gold cards that you think are going to help you win round 1, and that you're willing to spend. You don't want to spend your win condition golds, your big finishers, in round 1. You want to save those for hopefully round 3 and possibly round 2. Also, sometimes when it's not as important for you to win round 1, you may just need a couple of 3 or 4 bronze cards in your hand that aren't very good that you can just play on the board and kind of get them out of your hand, and then pass, hoping that the opponent ends up playing some of their gold cards. So I guess in that aspect, to keep it simple, just look for a handful of golds, a handful of bronzes. So maybe like 4 to 5 bronze cards, the rest gold, and you're looking for synergies. And quickly, let's talk about some of the other rounds. So round 2. One thing to note in round 2 is if you have lost round 1, you want to make sure that you have at least 1 bronze card in your hand, because the opponent can dry pass in round 2, which means they don't play a card. They just pass right off the bat, and you have to play a card. So if you have all golds in your hand round 2, you're going to have to play a gold card on an empty board and then pass, and that's not good. So if you lose round 1 and you're going into round 2, in that Mulligan phase, make sure you have at least 1 bronze card in your hand. And as far as round 3 goes, round 3 is pretty easy. All we need to do in the Mulligan phase is just draw all our golds. So that's all we're looking to do. Just draw as many gold cards as we can and build the best hand. Now, some of that may have sounded slightly complicated, but a lot of it just takes practice and time. Also, one thing we didn't cover are bricks. So this is a good example because in this hand we have a brick. So this card right here, Mulligan Volunteers. If there is a dwarf on this row, summon a copy of this unit from your deck to this row. So this card pulls our other copy of it out of the deck. But currently the other copy of it is in our hand. So essentially what that means is we would play this card as a 3. Nothing would happen because it can't pull it out of the deck because it's here. And then we would have to play this out of our hand as well. So we basically have 2 3-point cards in our hand, and that's not good. So we would just click there and redraw that card, send it back into the deck, and pull another one out. All right, so I think that's pretty much it on mulligans, so let's move on. All right, so let's touch very briefly on playing reactively. And what I mean by that is basing our decisions on what we play on what the opponent has either played or what we anticipate them playing. What we don't want to do is ignore their half of the board and just kind of slap our cards down. We can do that, but it's probably not going to be the best idea. So in this case, he has just played a Elven Swordmaster, and if we read the tooltip, it says damage an enemy unit by 1. It's locked to the melee row, cooldown 2. Whenever you play an elf, decrease cooldown by 1. So this can be very annoying to us, right? Because he's playing an elf deck, so he's going to be able to do damage every single turn. So we're going to want to disable this card. So we're just going to look at our hand. What are our options? We have Pavko here. He can do 2 damage, setting that to a 3. So we could use Malayan. This does 4 damage. We can kill it. We also have a card that locks his unit, so he would no longer be able to do the damage. So we have a couple options here. But that's the main point. We want to use our cards and basically, counteract what he has done. A mistake would be to play, let's say, our Mulligan Volunteers, not pay attention to this card, and just play our Volunteers, and we get these 2 down. But then guess what? Every turn he's going to be getting more and more value out of this card. So in this case, let's just go ahead and lock it. So we use Dor Garay. I don't even know if that's how you say his name, but we're going to use him. So we'll slap him down. We're going to lock that unit and do our damage. So that's just a quick example of playing reactively. And as far as anticipating what they're going to play, that comes with deck knowledge. But as you go along, you'll be able to you'll come up against the same decks, and you'll just kind of know. You're like, oh, he's going to play this card next. So in that case, if you think he's going to play, let's say, I don't know, a poison card next, well, then maybe you probably don't want to play some of your bigger units. Maybe play, in that case, like the Volunteers. So just try to always keep in mind what the opponent has played and what they're going to play, and then try to make the best decision you can. So, all right, let's move on. Okay, guys, let's talk about tempo for a second. So, a high tempo card is a card that has a lot of value instantly. So it's a high-powered card. A high-tempo card would be like an Egern or a Goliath, which play for 13 or 10 points. A low-tempo card, for example, would be something like this Lyrian Arbalist that's in our deck, where it plays for 3, but then it gains charges over time. So what I kind of want to talk about is respecting tempo. So in this case, we are on blue coins, so we are running the risk of losing on even. I'm actually playing against myself right now. So our opponent, which is me, is now going to play a high tempo card. We're going to play a Goliath. Okay, so that was a very high tempo play. We're now both at 8 cards. He has 14 points. I have 16. This is getting scary because we don't want to lose on even. So the correct thing to do in this instance would be to play a high tempo card. For example, we would want to probably play Nenica here because this plays for 8. We would want to play a high tempo card. But we're not going to do the right thing in this example. We're going to do the wrong thing. So let's say we're not respecting the tempo and we decide to play a Lyrian Arbalist.
Give me a target.
Okay, well that plays for 3 points. And yes, this will grow over time, but now we're in trouble because our opponent, if they are smart, is going to go for another high tempo play. So our opponent, which is me, is going to play Ada Striga. And we're actually going to take out the Lyrian Arbalist that he just put down. Now we are in really big trouble. He is 21 points, we are 17, and we have the same amount of cards. So the point is that you want to respect tempo. If your opponent plays a lot of tempo, usually you want to match that. You want to try to keep up with that, or else you'll find yourself in this situation. So I think that's it. Tempo gets a little more complicated, but that's the basics of it. So yeah, let's move on. Okay, let's talk about passing really quick. So passing is one of the most important, if not the most important aspects of Gwent. But unfortunately, it's also kind of one of the hardest things to master. It's something you just kind of learn over time. But there are a few guidelines I'd like to share and a few situations that hopefully will help out. So as we talked about before, one of the first things you want to do in a match is determine how important it is to win round 1. We've already gone through the Mulligan Phase. If we determined it's very important to win round 1, well, then we probably tried to get a hand, that has a bunch of synergy, has a mixture of bronzes, golds, and the golds that we have in our hand are golds that we're willing to spend to win the round. But there probably are a few golds in there as well that we don't want to spend, that we prefer not to, that we would like to save for round 3, our finishers, whatnot. So in that case, we need to look at our hand and determine, I'm willing to play this card, that card, maybe that card, this card, that card. I really don't want to play that card, and I don't want to play that card going in. And then basically just play out the round. Try to win, spend the cards that we're comfortable spending, hopefully win, and hopefully we don't have to spend the cards we didn't want to spend. Now, there are some occasions where maybe it's so close. We feel like we can still win, but it's so close that maybe spending one of those last golds that we didn't want to spend initially will get us the win. But that's a judgment call. That's a bit risky. But if you feel that it's going to win you the round and that it's worth it, then that's something you may want to do. But in general, you want to build your hand to win round one if that's important, and then play out that plan. Try to play in the most efficient way possible. Try to spend the cards only that you're willing to spend, and then at that point assess and pass. So it's also worth noting that when we say win a round, you can win a round and be a card down. That's fine, because you can dry pass in round 2, get the card back. You can push in round 2 and get that card back so that you both have even cards in the final round. You don't want to win a round 2 cards down. And of course, you don't want to lose a round on even. So, okay, another situation might be, let's say you just don't think there's any way you're going to be able to beat your opponent's deck in round 1, and maybe winning the round isn't that important. So in that case, you kind of want to get out of the round as soon as possible. So what you're going to do is you're just going to play some of your weak bronzes, make sure you don't lose on even, but just play your weak cards, and then pass out of the round. Well, hopefully not pass out, but pass out of the round. The other thing we should talk about is if you're on blue coin and the opponent starts pushing you very hard and he's getting close to beating you on even, and you're looking at your hand and you don't have that much power left in your hand, you think he might overtake you soon. Well, in that case, you probably want to take a pass. You want to avoid losing on even in general. So if you have the opportunity and you feel like he's about ready to overtake you, go ahead and take the pass. That would be a good time to take the pass. And also, if they do pass you up and you are in a situation where you're going to lose on even, that's not good, but sometimes it's better to take that pass early, say, I'm going to lose on even no matter what, take the pass, then try to keep playing cards and get to where you're not going to. Because you might then end up playing a lot of your gold cards, you might play them awkwardly where you don't get full value, but you may end up still losing the round on even. So sometimes it's better just to accept defeat in that moment and pass. So, like I said, it's something you'll get more of a feel for over time, but I think those are kind of basic guidelines to get you started. So, all right, let's move on. Okay, let's talk a little bit about round 2 and dry passing. So if we won round 1, we have the option to dry pass, and that simply means we don't play any cards, we just pass right off the top. Now, as you can see, my opponent has 7 cards and I have 6. I won the first round and went 1 card down, which is normal. That's usually what happens if you win the round, usually be a card down. So by doing this, it's going to force them to play a card, and then going into the third round, we will have the same number of cards. Now, usually you want to dry pass if your deck does very well in a long round. So by winning round 1 and dry passing in round 2, we now ensure ourselves a long round 3 on even cards. So we'll do that. We'll go ahead and just pass, and it's going to force our opponent to play 1 card. They'll probably play a bronze card. There we go. Alright, so let's talk about bleeding your opponent. So the reasons you would want to bleed your opponent are usually because you have a deck that does exceptionally well in a short round. So in this case, we're a monsters deck. We do really well in a short round. We're playing against a Scoia'tael deck that does better in a long round. So we want to try to make round 3 as short as possible. So we're going to force our opponent to play cards and make round 3 as short as possible. The other reason is you would want to force them, if they have a lot of combo pieces in their deck, you'd want to force them to play awkwardly and get those combo pieces out of their deck in round 2. So we're going to bleed this deck. I'm playing against myself again right now just for demonstration purposes, but we're going to bleed this deck a little bit. So we'll go ahead and play the Harpy Egg. And also the goal at the end is to be on even cards. So after we pass, we want them to have to play 2 cards to catch up, and then that way we'll go into round 3 on even. Okay, so already our opponent, me, is going to have to play semi-awkwardly. So we'll go ahead and do that.
We've lived in isolation for too bloody long.
Okay. And now, let's see what we got in our graveyard. And as we talked about before, you can right-click in your graveyard and see what's in there. So this card, this ghoul, would pull out a card from our graveyard. So we're just going to kind of play some cheaper bronzes right now. We'll just do this. We'll see if we can get our opponent to play any really good cards awkwardly. Okay, so they play this Mahakam Defender that is going to boost every turn. Okay. So we'll go ahead and play our Ice Giant next, probably. Alright, and let's see what they do. Oh man, so they are actually, who is me, is actually going to play be forced to play a card really don't want to play right now, right? So, going to be forced to play Ida, which is going to give Vitality, so this is going to give us points over time.
The time of the white frost and white light is now.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to want to go pretty big. We're going to want to gain a lot of points, so we're going to do this. Alright, go ahead and pass. So that gave us a pretty big point swing. Okay, so now our opponent needs to think about what they're going to play. They don't want to play their good cards, so he's going to play an officer. And then at this point, they need to play one more card to catch up with us, right? So at this point, we are going to pass. We're going to pass. And this is then going to force them to play one more card. And unfortunately for them, they have all gold cards. So they're going to have to play one of their gold cards in order to win the round.
Some things cannot be forgiven.
So then in this case, we played all bronze cards. We played bronze cards that synergized well together, and we forced out 2 gold cards from their hand, and we shortened round 3, and now we're going to be going to round 3 on even cards. So that's kind of the idea with bleeding. That's what you want to do with it. You want to bleed if you want a short round 3, or if you're playing against a deck that you need to get combo pieces out of. Now, let's talk about defending the bleed. I'm not going to do an example for this because it's a bit redundant, but defending the bleed. If you're on the other side of that, basically what you want to do, you want to respect the tempo, of course, but you want to try. It's hard. That's why people bleed you. You don't want to overcommit. So you want to respect the tempo, but try to play your bronze cards and try to avoid playing your key pieces, if at all possible. They may force you to play your key cards, but if all possible, try to hold on to them. Try to survive the round. And also, if you're being bled, if you have the ability to stay up a card, then that's good. You may want to spend some more resources to stay up a card. Don't let them get that card back. But the idea is basically, when you're being bled, try to survive the bleed, and then get into round 3 with as many of your good cards or synergies intact. It really sucks being bled. Alright, let's move on. All right, so the last thing we're going to talk about is round 3. And what do you do in round 3? You win. You try to win. Round 3 is kind of easy. Basically, hopefully, you're a good player and you've drawn all of your gold cards, and your job is basically just to play your cards in the most efficient way possible. So, make sure that you're reacting to what they play. If they play a card that you want to remove, make sure you try to remove it. If if you have a card that's valuable that you think they might be able to remove from your board, well, maybe hang on to it a little bit longer. Try to play around their strategies. But yeah, just try to play your cards in the most efficient way possible, and then hopefully you win the match. All right, guys, that concludes the second episode of my beginner's guide to Gwent. Thank you so much for checking it out. I hope it's been helpful. And I'm really excited about the next one. The next one we're going to be doing some deck building, which I feel like is one of the most fulfilling parts of Gwent. So I will see you guys next time. All right, adios.